I went to a conference this week. It's really interesting, very deep experience. I'll try to, there's so much going on and it's hard to really talk about succinctly. But basically, two community-based organizations, Mundo Gardens and Urban Collaborative Project. They are local South Bay, San Diego, uh, do-gooder community-based organizations. And they have received a grant and partnered with various government agencies, the City of San Diego, SANDAG, California Department of Transportation, City of National City. They've teamed up to turn basically this 150-acre area in National City under the freeway into a community garden, art, connecting, beautiful uh, space. And they had this 2 full day conference where people from Smart Growth America in Washington, D.C. flew out, and people from Senator Butler's office came, and our assembly person in Sacramento was there, David Alvarez, and we had about 60 or 70 people at this 2 day conference, basically to brainstorm what to do with this land that has been repatriated or given back to the community or all these ways of putting it. And so I just learned so much, and there's so much to talk about. Uh, but to really see the importance of, or not the importance, but the impact that building a freeway has, right? So they showed these pictures of what that neighborhood, which is really just about a mile north of us, what that neighborhood looked like in the 50s, and then what it looks like now with not just the 805 running through it, but like these long, big, almost like mile-long off-ramps. Like if anyone's been to the North Gate Market here, one of the off-ramps leads to the North Gate Market. And you just see how it just completely divided and cut up this community. And of course, we see that these types of things are not built in typically white, more affluent neighborhoods. Um, so really, this project is aimed at restorative justice. It's aimed at rebuilding community. And one of the things that was just so inspiring to me and something that really interests me is to see these local, I mean, these two community-based organizations, Mundo Gardens and Urban Collaborative Project, one of them is a team of two, the other is a team of four. These are small, local, authentic, uncompromising, unambitious, just local people who grew up here and have spent their lives trying to get a better shake for their people. And in my experience, there's so many examples of those kinds of organizations refusing to work with the public sector and government because there's always requirements and limitations and all kinds of red tape and bureaucracy, and it very often ends up kind of sour. And so to see these two very small local organizations really get in bed quite profoundly to the point where like the senator from DC is sending his team to this big conference. I'm really interested in that, to see that bridge between the authentic needs of the grassroots, really working in tandem with the man. There's no other way to put it. It's the man. It's Babylon coming together. So I just am always really inspired by that, to know that that can possibly work. And this 2 day conference was really very positive. People from the government side, people from the community side, all kind of like respecting, listening to each other, holding space for each other, to make a big change in this neighborhood. Freeways get built, and all of a sudden, the church that you just used to walk to 5 minutes away becomes a danger zone, becomes something separate, right? This is all about separating, dividing communities. In fact, this particular area kind of divides National City from Southeast San Diego. And so there's a big divide there. And so a lot of the efforts around this initiative are to bring the community back together in a peaceful, loving, positive, growth oriented kind of way. Um, so that's all beautiful and kumbaya, and it's great. And I hope everyone gets involved. Mundo Gardens, Urban Collaborative Projects, look them up. They just want community buy-in right now. They just want people to show up. Eventually, there's going to be a lot of work. They're even thinking about, because we're talking about millions of dollars here, like multi-million of dollars grant that these two tiny organizations got to transform this space. And so they're even talking about even knocking down one of the off ramps. It's pretty ambitious stuff. Um, but there's just a couple aspects here that I really wanted to take a look at from a Zen perspective to kind of help us with our practice and to see how our practice is alive in the world right now. So the first thing is kind of like in my history, well, how should I say it? I've always felt that the things that need to be addressed first are like the basics: housing, food, education, healthcare. And until these things are taken care of and everybody has all of that secure and wrapped up, there is no reason to be talking about gardens and nature and art and circle time and community. Like that's all luxury. That's all later. And of course, we live in a neighborhood that sees a lot of poverty and a lot of is underserved in a lot of ways. And so at first, as I was seeing this conference, people flying out, they're hiring bands to play during the lunch break, and we're eating food. You know, they fed us for breakfast and lunch. I'm like, so these millions of dollars are going to like hold these 2-day conferences so that we can figure out how to like make murals and build gardens when our school system is incredibly underserved. You know, I kind of came with this value judgment. This isn't how we should be spending our money. That stuff should come later. Um, and through my time there and opening up and listening to the people who have grown up here, who have been impacted by all the ways that we have been underserved and cut short, underappreciated, unconsidered. What they want is this green space, this space for a playground for their children, a place with lighting and beauty and art and a chance to come together as a community, play music. And so that really got me thinking, like, okay, maybe how I've been indoctrinated to think our money should be spent. No, this is what you need to do. Let me come in and tell you what you need because art isn't it. Um, but when I saw not only what people were sharing, but examples of how bringing art, bringing beauty, bringing peace, bringing community spaces actually can be a first step to seeing better education, better investment in the community, more businesses coming there, more economic prosperity, actually coming from these things. I was just completely changed. My mind completely changed and saw how all of those things, healthcare, education, food security, housing security, art opportunity, chances to express yourself, places for communities to come together to feel safe, they're all intertwined. And so that was a huge lesson for me. And I think it's kind of illustrated by this one koan. I really wanted to find some Zen literature to kind of illustrate this because it just felt so right, what I was experiencing there. So for those of you who are new, koans are these little stories or parables that you meditate with, and then you work with a teacher to kind of penetrate the juice of the koan. It's the best explanation I have for now. Um, so there's one koan in the Blue Cliff Record, also known as the Hekigan Roku. It's case 83. And in this particular koan case, it features Uman, who's a major Chinese master that shows up in a lot of koans. And Uman is addressing his assembly at the temple, and he says, the ancient Buddhas commune with the open pillar. What level of activity is this? And then he answers himself by saying, clouds gather over North Mountain, rain falls over South Mountain. So that's the koan. And then if you're working on it, you sit with that, you open up to what's being offered there, and then you meet with your teacher and you kind of offer an expression or a presentation of what that juice of that koan is, and then you kind of massage it with your teacher. Just a little bit of koan practice. And then we have this terrible task of trying to talk about them in Dharma talks. So please forgive me for trying to make any kind of sense of this. So Uman is talking to his assembly, and he says, the ancient Buddhas commune with the open pillar. The ancient Buddhas. Just take a minute to see what happens inside of you when you hear that. The ancient Buddhas. Do they feel like sources of wisdom? Do they feel like something better than me? Something I aspire to? Something I'm grateful for? Just feel what comes up when you think, sages, Buddhas, ancient masters. And then how does that feeling change when we listen to them and realize that they are not separate from you? The ancient Buddhas, the sages, the enlightened beings are staring at me right now. So he says the ancient Buddhas commune with the open pillar. There's a lot of talk of pillars in these koans, and I'm like, who fucks with pillars? But I was just amazed because I was like, nervous about finding a koan that would fit this situation. And I remembered the North Mountain, South Mountain part. There might be something there. And then I read back, and this fool's talking about pillars. And you go to this area under the freeway, and there's just these huge pillars. This area, the overpass is like 70, 80 feet in the air. It's like very high. Maybe not. That's maybe exaggerated. So this park, these areas that we're trying to transform are literally marked by pillars everywhere. So that was nice. If Echo is here, that must have been the DJ at work. I don't think he's here. Anyway, so when the ancient Buddhas commune with the open pillar, how amazing is that? So back in Chinese times, this open pillar refers to the center pillar of the temple. So it's it's open because it's not surrounded by other architecture. It's just kind of right in the middle, holding everything up. So pillars, support, being of service, selfless, offering. Pillars don't get acknowledged. They don't get thanked, but they're holding us up. So, what happens when the ancient Buddhas, enlightened beings, commune with, mix with? One commentary I read about this koan says this is all about sex. How do we deal with sex in our enlightened life? What happens when the Buddha and our Buddhist action take the shape of sex? That's a whole other conversation that we will not get into right now, but I thought that was a very powerful interpretation of the koan. But for right now, yeah, what level of activity is that? Enlightened beings mixing with, communing with the activity of support, the oneness of Buddhahood manifesting as selfless service. Or in the case of this freeway situation, what happens when we as Buddhas commune with this freeway that has devastated this community for decades? And then what level of activity is that? This is kind of where the juice starts happening. What level of activity is that? And immediately, I'm called out. Uman is calling me out because I come in there and saying, this is a talking about art and murals, like this is a lower level of activity than if we were to put this money into education. We should be putting this money here. This is, lower, this is higher. Just think of all the ways that we evaluate our activity. We come in with these notions of what's most important, of what needs to be done, how things should be. We have constructed these levels of activity. It's amazing to have people in my life who see this election, for instance, as the most important thing that will ever face, as the most important election of your life. I've never seen an election where they don't say that. I also haven't seen as many as some. But that's all that matters. That is the highest level of activity. Go knock on doors and tell people to vote. Nothing could be more important than that. And then to also have people in my life who are smart, beautiful, open, loving, important people who are like, election who? Kamala what? Oh, yeah, I don't know. And their level of activity has to do with healing, personal healing, or hitting the local streets, offering food to people. I don't care who's in office. I just need to make sure that these meals get to these hungry seniors. That's the highest level of activity. So most often these kinds of questions that these ancient Zen masters ask, what level of activity is this, is not so much about like getting the right answer as much as getting us to look at how do I evaluate? How do I create levels? And then can I open that up? Because I can tell you that feeling of like having my mind changed in this conference, that this is exactly what this community needs. Could be the perfect thing to spend these dollars on. I just felt so connected to the people that were there. I live here and I've been coming here for a while, but we're talking about people who have lived here for 50, 60, 70 years and have seen this happen. And so for me to come in with my ideas of level of activity and you guys got it wrong, like how arrogant and unfortunate would that be? So yeah, so he pokes us. What level of activity is this? Buddhas communing with pillars, enlightened beings, being of service. What level of activity is that? And he answers himself, clouds gather over South Mountain, rain falls over North Mountain. And, I feel so silly trying to put words to this because you just kind of can't, but we have to. Um, but it's all connected. It's all one. Clouds gather over southeast San Diego. Rain falls over National City. Clouds gather over uh, making murals and gardens and public spaces. Rain falls over your child's education. Rain falls over attention to taking care of each other. Clouds gather over green spaces. Rain falls over a child wanting to become an entrepreneur or wanting to become a climate activist. It's all connected. Clouds gather over you. Rain falls on me. And so any talk of level or this side or that side um, totally misses the point of what it is to manifest your ancient Buddhahood that you are, that we all are. So, yeah. Another thing that came up that I wanted to talk about was, of course, I'm forgetting now. Oh, yes. So there was this dude from Caltrans, which is the California Department of Transportation, and just shout out to California. I know it's scary to work with state officials, but like there are a lot of very progressive, grassroots-oriented people in our red tape agencies. I'll just say it. I know we hate the government, but there's a lot of good stuff going on. Anyway, so this guy from Caltrans, he was giving a presentation on a panel, and he said something that really stuck with me. He said, let's do the work so that we can turn activists into advocates. Let's turn activists into advocates. I thought that was so ringy. That really struck me. Um, so yeah, I just kind of wanted to like figure out what he meant by that. And I don't think that the point is like activism is bad, advocates are good. We should turn all of one into the other. I don't think that's the case. We definitely need both. But it's just an interesting contrast that I haven't really heard before. And so I was looking into it. And so I guess, activist is like protest, righteous anger, educating people. And then advocate is like meeting with the people who can make change and advocating for something. So I don't know. This is just me kind of playing around. But let's just say, for sake of argument, that activists point out and make noise around the problem, and advocates go to those in power for solutions. And you maybe can't even have one without the other. So to say like one is good, one is bad is really not the point. But I just thought that was an interesting thing to think about, and the uses of each. Sometimes we need righteous anger rallies in the streets. But if you really want to make change and see change happen on a policy level, on a societal level, you have to advocate for what you want with the powers that be. And when you advocate, when you're in that realm, right, when you're an activist and you're doing your rallies and your protests, and I don't know, I'm so in awe of like actual activists that I don't want to like, um, you know, not do that work justice. So take what I say very lightly, please. But that kind of like raw, authentic messaging of activism has to find a place of like softness and understanding when it comes to advocacy. Because when you go to Sacramento, when you go to DC, when you go to your local council person and you say, we demand this now, and they say, okay, well, I can't because of this and this and this, and if we do this, then these people are going to get screwed, and this and this and this, and you realize there kind of has to be like an understanding of how things work, especially on like big national scales and all of that. So I thought of another koan to kind of quickly illustrate this, which is fun, right? Like just look at your life and here's a Caltrans guy talking on a panel. How does this 1,000-year-old koan applying to exactly this? Try it out. It's kind of fun. Um, so famous koan, we talk about it a lot. Nansen kills a cat. So there's a temple, and there's monks from the East Hall, and there's monks from the West Hall, and they're fighting over a cat. We don't necessarily know why. Maybe they're like, he's ours, no, he's ours, or you fed him, or we fed him last week, you feed him this week, no, we fed him last week, or maybe it's like a philosophical thing, like cats have Buddha nature, no, cats don't have Buddha nature, whatever it might be. They're fighting over this cat and, digging in and debating and holding on to what their level of activity is, most important. And then Nansen sees this. Nansen is the head teacher or the abbot of the temple at this time. And he comes and sees them fighting, and he grabs the cat, and I guess he's wielding a knife of some sort or a fake knife. And he says, if any of you can give me a turning word, I'll spare the cat's life. And no one says anything. And so in this story, he guts the cat and kills it right in front of him. Highly doubtful this actually happened like this. Very possible it's just a story. Very possible he faked it, pantomimed it to prove a point. So then later he tells this story to one of his senior students, Joshu, who also shows up in a lot of these koans. And he tells this story about the cat and the monks fighting. And Joshu simply takes off his shoes, puts them on his head, and walks out. And Nansen says, had you been there, I could have spared the cat. So that's your koan to sit with. But to apply it to activists and advocacy, you can see these monks fighting as that kind of activist energy, digging in, fighting for what you think is right. And of course, we need that. We have to do that. When we see injustice, when we see systems of oppression that aren't being acknowledged, we have to do that. But it does divide us. It does perpetuate this kind of separation that we all fall victim to. And so Nansen comes along and he says, okay, fighting is cool, but can any of you show me that you can also let go of what you're holding on to? Can you show me that uh, you are one with the other monks, one with the cat, one with birth and death itself? And no one can say anything. And so, sometimes these egregious acts of killing something or cutting off a limb or hitting somebody, they're all just kind of acts of inspiration or what we call upaya to try to get us to let go, to really come face to face with impermanence, not just of life, but of our ideas and concepts and freeways and levels of activity and values and vows, always changing, impermanent. Um, so they couldn't get out of their activist energy, right? He was kind of asking for advocacy energy. How can you soften? So then Joshu comes around, and his response is takes off his shoes, puts them on his head. And what a fun, silly way of expressing sometimes things aren't what I thought they were. We are so sure that shoes belong down here. We are so sure that this needs to be our next elected official. We are so sure that money needs to be spent in this way. And if you go to advocate for something with that energy, it might be very hard to get anywhere, especially with red tape and a huge, almost 400 million person country that you live in. So can we take our shoes off from down there, see what happens if we put them up here? Flip everything around. Watch the debate and say, I'm going to go in open to whichever candidate you don't like. I'm going to go in thinking that maybe they have the right answer. See if they can prove me wrong. See if I can like be a scientist and come with like the opposite thesis and see if I can prove that wrong. Um, that's the advocacy energy. Can I take my message and my needs into this office and be ready to take my shoes off and put them on my head? Be ready to uh, be flexible and flow with what I may not see, right? Activism is so strong and like this is what's needed. And advocacy is more like this is what I want. What do we need to do to get there? What kind of shoes do we need to take off and put in a different place to make this work? So, and then of course Nansen appreciates that answer because it's such a nice way of saying, I'm not stuck. I'm not stuck. I'm ready to, you know, put my rakusu on like this. Feels really weird. Um, so yeah, I hope that this place and this practice serves that purpose for you, for us, um, to investigate the levels of activity that we impose upon ourselves and others, and yeah, to let go, to be an activist, and to be strong in our values, but then to also invite that advocacy spirit and see how flexible and how malleable and impermanent our ideas are. And through that, we can turn ugly, oppressive, separating systems into beautiful, green, lush areas of coming together as one. Thank you.